Hi, this is Kirk, the bariatric carnivore. Let's talk about a disease that's just not talked about enough, but it's certainly a significant problem, and it's only going to keep getting worse because if the trends continue, it will keep getting worse, and that is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Now, that seems like a really weird name. It's like, what do you mean non-alcoholic fatty liver disease? Well, it used to be just flat out fatty liver disease, and it was always associated with people that were heavy drinkers. Their livers would get ruined. That's what produced cirrhosis, cancer of the liver, and it was only amongst heavy drinkers. And people would come in sometimes and, they would say, hey, you've got fatty liver. And they would say, no, I don't drink. And people go, yeah, right. You don't drink. And then all of a sudden kids started getting it. That's when they created, the kids probably aren't drinking. So they started looking at it again and realized, no, there really is a version of this disease that seems to affect people that don't drink heavily. And they're getting all the same problems as somebody who does drink heavily. And their livers are scarring over and they're needing liver transplants. And this is a disease that really in the 1980s, according to best estimates, was affected about 18% of adults in the United States. But now it's jumped up to nearly 40%. It is the leading cause of liver cirrhosis and liver cancer that you've got. So it's a serious disease. I mean, this is what's going to cause a real shortage or a growing shortage of livers needed for transplant because there's so many people coming down with this stuff. And it's one of those diseases that are unfortunate in that there's no real, okay, so you got a fatty liver, big whoop. It's not affecting your quality of life yet, but it will. Because cirrhosis of the liver is basically what happens is you get a fatty liver, it becomes inflamed over time, and the inflammation is what leads to the scarring, and that's the cirrhosis part. And when your liver starts losing function, then you got real serious problems, because this is our body's largest organ for a reason. This is the chemical factory that produces virtually all the major hormones that you need. And when it starts breaking down and not working and gets fat and inflamed, you got a problem. And what's interesting about this disease also is how closely akin it is to fatty pancreas. They're both in the same general area. They're both part of that same basic system. And when the pancreas gets fatty, then you start creating some of the insulin issues and again, inflammation there. So they're very closely related and they've both got very similar causes. And what happened, one of the reasons why I speculate, we don't know, because frankly, our dysfunctional system doesn't really want to know what caused it. But I kind of liken this to foie gras, which is fat goose liver. And the way you fatten a goose liver is you take a goose, you cram a funnel down its throat, and you pour corn down it. Corn is just very high in fructose. And you may have heard of high fructose corn syrup. Well, guess what we started putting into soft drinks somewhere around the 1980s. That's right, high fructose corn syrup. And then all of a sudden we start seeing this skyrocketing rate. We've doubled the rate of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, a disease that really didn't exist until the 80s. And suddenly it's now ubiquitous. And so I think there's kind of a link between the two, but again, that's an associational link. That's not a scientific study that proves it, but it kind of makes sense. When you introduce something to the diet and you start to see this type of change happening, I think you can make a pretty darn good association that, like, hey, boy, people started smoking. There's this big rise in lung cancer. Probably a link. But, who am I? I'm just a guy in Oklahoma that doesn't have a medical degree. So, I may not be the best source art, but it certainly makes sense that they are probably related in some way. So the question is, well, what do you do about it? What pill do I take? Well, that's the good and bad news. and probably the reason why you haven't heard about this disease. There isn't a pill. There isn't a pill that will cure fatty liver disease. This is something that you've got to take care of through lifestyle. You've got to eliminate the sugars, particularly high fructose corn syrup, but also refined grains, etc. So when you get off of those refined carbohydrates and the sugars, the fatty liver disease goes away. It's kind of amazing. And what's amazing is how quickly it ends if you incorporate these changes. Ask almost any bariatric surgeon. One of the things that they hate is when they go in there to do the surgery, particularly where they're taking off 70% of the stomach. What will happen is if somebody has not followed the diet plan going into it, they have a fatty liver, and what they have to use is a speculum, push the liver up out of the way so they can get a clear shot, because they're coming in from the side of the abdomen in order to do that laparoscopic surgery, and that's going to damage the liver. It's going to create complications. So they put you on a special diet for usually about 2 weeks before, but I've talked to some bariatric surgeons that say really it clears up in 4 days, and that is if you just switch to a low carb diet. And if you do that for a few days, the liver will burn off that fat in the liver first. It's really miraculous how quickly you can end your fatty liver. Now, how do you get diagnosed for it? Well, frankly, there's really no way. There's no real symptoms for it. There's no blood test. The only way you could do it is by an MRI. But frankly, if you're eating a standard American diet and you're drinking sugary sodas, odds are you probably have it. So all the more reason, hopefully, to encourage you to just switch to a low carb diet and to look at lifestyle that will get rid of that ultra processed food. And when you do that, you're not going to have fatty liver disease, and you don't want it. I mean, you just do not want to set yourself up for liver dysfunction, cirrhosis, liver cancer, and all the other associated problems that come with long-term fatty liver disease. And it's only going to get worse. You know, when we've got 40% of adults today that have it, you know it's a growing problem. And about 2 to 3% of the people that have it are going to develop cirrhosis and all the other problems. And if you've ever seen anybody die of liver failure, that is not something that you want to wish on your worst enemy. So, highly recommend you make the lifestyle change while you can. And think on the plus side. 3 or 4 days of low carb, the fatty liver's pretty much gone. That's a big plus. But you're not going to hear about it from your doctor. This is what's so frustrating about it. When there's not, why do we hear so much about cholesterol? High cholesterol, high LDL cholesterol is not really the disease. It doesn't, if you get rid of if you lower your LDL cholesterol, you're not going to feel better tomorrow. You're not going to feel like $1 million. You're not going to be jumping up and down going, yay, great to be me. I'm glad my LDL is finally down. But why do we care about it? Because our doctors care about it, because there's a $1 trillion drug called a statin. And those statin drugs, which reduce LDL, that's the push. That's why we hear so much about LDL cholesterol, like that's the only thing that affects our health. Why don't we hear about fatty liver disease? No drug. And it takes time to explain to people what fatty liver disease is, what lifestyle changes they need to make to get rid of it. And frankly, most doctors are convinced that patients won't do anything anyway, even if you tell them about it. That's the horrible, dysfunctional reality of medicine in the United States today. So, the great news is, if you're already on a keto diet, you really don't have to worry about fatty liver. Unless you're an alcoholic or something like that, then maybe you have to worry about having a cirrhosis. But other than that, if you're not drinking alcohol to excess, and you're not drinking high fructose corn syrup, and you're not eating refined carbs, odds are you don't have a fatty liver. This is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore. If you like this message, please hit the like and subscribe button. I try to put out a couple messages each week. Please join this tribe. Leave comments down below. If you've known somebody that has died of cirrhosis of the liver or liver cancer, can you please leave a comment below so that people know that they do not want that? And I will talk to you again soon.